We set up our stocks to be visible like this. Now we also want to fill them with some data. We get some dummy data here. We'll soon replace this, but for now it's good to use that here. I of course want to send the stock I'm at in this loop here to this stock component. We learned how to do this with props. So I'm going to add this stock prop here and notice the colon to bind it dynamically to the stock variable we're creating in this loop. And with that I can go to my stock component, and here I'll add a script part to it now. And I want to export a default object, and in this object of course set up my props. And props is at least stock because I'm getting this individual stock sent to this component here. Now with the stock being available here, I can of course replace my placeholders to output the actual stock name, the actual stock price, and also to then start setting up my input and this buy button, because I want to make them work, right? At least the basic functionality. Now for the input, I want to bind this to my data object. So here I will return a new object, of course, which is quantity, which is 0 initially, and I will bind my input here by passing vModel equals quantity, like this, quantity. This will now bind my input to this data field, and we can see this if we switch over. We now see the names, the real prices, and all the inputs are populated with 0. The next step now is to set up the button. For now I only want to log it to the console. We'll soon change this though. In order to set up the button, I'll add a click listener here, and I'll want to execute by stock here, let's say. Now, of course, to be able to execute this, I need to add my methods property in this view instance, and I want to have my by stock method in there. And here I will create a new order. Now, this order is basically a JavaScript object where I do have my stock ID. And for that, I can simply access the stock I get passed via props binding, or via the property binding here, the prop up there. This ID of the stock. I want to have a stock price. This of course is this stock price. That's the price of the individual stock. And I want to have the quantity. This quantity. This is my order. And with that, we're of course able to calculate the total price with quantity times the individual stock price. Now with that, I kind of want to buy it. For now, we don't do that because for that we will need Vuex, we need our global state management where I then want to, of course, change my funds and so on. So I don't do that right now. Instead, I want to simply console log this order, and I will set this quantity back to null thereafter, to 0 to be precise. So to reset it after the order. If we save this and have a look at our application, if I open the console here and enter 10 and click on buy, we see this almost worked, though the stock price of undefined, that doesn't look right. Well, the reason is that this should be stock.price, not stock price in a camel case. So with this, if we try this again, 2, that looks much better. So we got our buy button hooked up, we got the input hooked up. Now one thing we can do right now is I can enter -10 for example and buy this, and you see it in the console that if we have a look at this object, this worked. This of course is certainly not what I want. Also, I could buy more than I have funds, though at the moment I don't have any funds, so that's something we'll fix in the future, but at least I want to make sure that we can't buy a negative amount of stocks right now. For that I will add a new attribute binding to this button where I disable it under certain conditions. What are these conditions? Well, one of it is that the quantity is smaller or equal to 0. I can't buy stocks if I don't buy at least one of them. I also want to make sure that my number is an integer. Therefore, I check if it's not an integer here, in which case I would disable the button. So if it's not an integer, I want to disable the button. With this in place, if we go back, we see the button is disabled by default. If I enter -1, it stays disabled. If I enter 1, it gets enabled. If I enter 1.2, it gets disabled again because that's not an integer. With that, I got this functionality in place. I'd say that looks pretty good. We already see that we're now reaching the point where it's hard to continue as long as we don't have a proper state management in place. Because we want to check our funds, we want to be able to execute the order. It won't make sense to work on the portfolio if we're not able to really store our purchase somewhere. So the next videos are definitely about setting up Vuex, setting up our state management, and that again is a great challenge for you to take over at this part and try setting this up at your own. Think about what's in your state, which mutations do you have, how do you dispatch these mutations, which getters do you need, and so on. I'll see you in the next video when I start working on that.